Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is my official Prestige Master review of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 Zombies. I actually hit Prestige Master quite a while ago, and I wanted to wait until we had DLC 1 to be able to make this review, because I wanted to not only judge the base game maps, but the DLC 1 quality will give us some kind of peek into the quality bar and the offering for what is most likely going to be the rest of the DLC maps. It's a pretty good barometer for that kind of thing. So with the base maps already in the game and DLC 1 out, I figured now is time to make my official review of what I think about the game so far. What I'm going to do is separate this into a couple of different categories and talk about the things that I like and dislike about these aspects. So I think where I'm going to go ahead and start is with the general gameplay. We're going to get more specific as we go along, but let's talk about the general structure of Black Ops 6 Zombies gameplay, and I've touched on a lot of these briefly before the game came out when I got to play it a little bit early, but the gameplay has been slightly changed since then, and there's a lot more context to this now that I've played all of the maps. So the general gameplay is obviously a direct sequel and innovation to the systems that have been introduced in Cold War Zombies, right? The weapon rarity system, salvage, stuff like that, that's all a carryover from Cold War. Even replating armor, these are all aspects that are fundamentally built into the Cold War zombie style gameplay, and Black Ops 6 is looking to innovate or iterate on that original formula. It's worth noting that the Cold War Zombies formula is already an iteration on what you might call the original Zombies formula, particularly with the point system and how Pack-a-Punch works and many different aspects. But when it comes to, let's say, the overall gameplay, the emphasis is more or less the same. Kill zombies, get points, upgrade your weapons, get perks, etc. And it's a round-based zombies mode, so obviously the goal is to survive as long as possible, or additionally you can do a main quest or an Easter egg to end your game as well. Either way, those are your two main goals. It's just the way that you get there is fundamentally different between each game. And Black Ops 6 is also pretty different to Cold War in this aspect because you go about doing these things a little bit differently. They've simplified the salvage system from Cold War, in which that game had two different rarities of scraps, which, you know, each one had a different use, whereas in this game, there's only one kind of scrap and you use it to upgrade your weapons, put on ammo mods, and build things at the crafting table. And it's a lot more simplified and straightforward this way, I think. This is just a genuine improvement from Cold War, in my opinion. I don't really see any downsides to simplifying the scrap into one main thing, but now this means that we have two very different kinds of currency, and this is going to be important when it comes to the point system. Obviously, in old Zombies, there was only ever one point system. There was no scrap or anything. Virtually everything you would purchase or buy was all your normal points. And in old Zombies, there were more creative ways to acquire these points, similarly how there's creative ways to also acquire scrap, but less so on the point system in modern Zombies. You can't really use like a weak weapon to, you know, basically min-max for points in the early game, and like you would in early Zombies, to kind of get ahead of the curve. The reason they changed the point system, according to Kevin Drew, is that he really didn't want there to be a wrong way to kill zombies. And they have accomplished that, I will say that, but they've created another problem, which we'll get to in just a second. What I want to say about the general gameplay before we get into maps or anything specific is that I think they've actually nailed it when it comes to core gameplay. Rounds 1 to 30, shooting zombies is fun, upgrading your weapons is a great time. Like that whole entire 30-second gameplay loop is unbelievably solid, and I think rounds 1 to 30 are like sheer perfection when it comes to just the core gameplay. They've absolutely nailed it in most regards. However, the one thing that I'm not overly enthusiastic about is the point system, and this has been talked about to death, but I think I can tell you exactly why this system doesn't really work for this game. Now, to go back really quick, we've had an original point system in Zombies where you get 10 points per hit, basically, right? I'm not going to go into how this works intricately, but you would get more points by killing a zombie with either a headshot or by knifing them, and so in the early game, you could shoot a zombie a couple times in the leg and then knife them for a lot of points. And this would create like a meta way to kill zombies, right? Or sort of like an optimal way to do it. In Black Ops 6 Zombies, there is no optimal way to kill zombies other than really a headshot, because you're not going to get awarded that many more points for like shooting them in the leg with a weak gun and then knifing them. That doesn't really exist anymore. And because they did that deliberately, they didn't want to have a wrong way to kill zombies. Now, that's true. There isn't a wrong way to kill zombies anymore, which in some sense is nice because it doesn't matter what weapon you're using and you can just blow up zombies the same way. The problem is, though, what they've done is created a wrong way to spend points. Something that none of us would have known when we played it a little bit early before the game released, because we just didn't have that experience, and something that I'm sure all of you have noticed by this point if you've played any amount of Black Ops 6 Zombies substantially essentially is that the point economy is really strict in this game. And what that means is that there is essentially one correct way to use the points in currency you get, and any deviation from that, then you're just wasting insanely valuable resources that are going to put you at a pretty severe disadvantage as the rounds continue to go on. Basically, if you spend the game hitting the box, trying out different weapons, trying to maybe pack-a-punch them, or, you know, getting guns off the wall and trying to try them out too and upgrade those as well, that is the worst thing you can do in Black Ops 6 Zombies. You essentially get pigeonholed into using one gun, which is your loadout weapon, which, you know, in some sense is fair enough because that is kind of the point of the game. They want you using your loadout weapon, whatever it is, and then kind of investing into that. But even if you dare to try to hit the mystery box to do something else with your weaponry, because there's no longer a different kind of third currency that kind of spreads this evenly across the board, there is now a right and a wrong way to spend your currency, and unless you're investing literally everything into your single loadout weapon, then you're going to fall behind very rapidly to a point where it just feels like the zombies just overpower you very quickly. This is a problem because it doesn't feel like you have the ability to really experiment and try different things in the sandbox, which Call of Duty Zombies was essentially built on. These maps are giant sandboxes in and of themselves, and they kind of encourage you to try out different things to see what works for you and develop strategies, you know, within that sandbox. But that kind of experimentation is very much discouraged in this game. It's not that it's impossible, it's just that the dominant strategy is very clearly dumping all of your investment into one gun. So if you're spreading that across multiple weapons, you're just going to be a lot weaker than you could be, and nobody really wants to do that. So I think the discouragement of the sandbox gameplay really hurts the zombies formula in some way, and I don't think this was as big of a problem in Cold War Zombies, even though it had damn near the same point system, and I don't really know why it's much different there, but in Black Ops 6, it's quite strict. But let's leave that for now. We'll come back to gameplay stuff a bit later. Let's move on to maps. Now, I played both Terminus and Liberty Falls at separate events before the game released to the public, and the maps were a little bit different than they are on the release version of the game. You know, Liberty Falls was basically the map that we played at COD XP, and I think people had a very weird, warped perception of what this map was going to be because it was simply not done, the build that we played, and they made a lot of changes before launch that ended up addressing a lot of the community's concerns, particularly the HUD, the lack of atmosphere, let's say. A lot of these were big issues for the community, and I would say that after Liberty Falls launch, a lot of that talk seemed to have disappeared. Now, I'm not going to say that Liberty Falls has like the most zombies atmosphere we've ever seen in a COD map. That's not true at all, but Liberty Falls does precisely what I think it needs to do and be the most casual map in the game, where you can access the pack-a-punch machine and just get your game going within the first like 10 minutes of the game, if that. You can get to Pack-a-Punch very quickly and just start shooting zombies. That is literally what this map was made for, and I talked about the duality between the Giant and Shadows of Evil in Black Ops 3 and why I think that was just such an unbelievably smart move. And they've done the same thing here with Liberty Falls and Terminus. Like, Liberty Falls is clearly the more casual map. I will say the gap in casual quality between these two experiences, like Terminus and Liberty Falls versus the Giant and Shadows of Evil, is not quite as extreme, but it's noticeable enough to where Treyarch tweeted out stats and noted that Liberty Falls basically has double the playtime from the overall player base than Terminus does. And I think because it's a slightly more casual friendly map, anybody looking just to jump on and shoot zombies, not exactly hardcore zombie players, are much more likely to go to Liberty Falls. Now, the other thing to consider though is this is not just the Giant situation in BO3 where it doesn't really have a main Easter egg. Like, it's a casual map and it serves its purpose there, but Liberty Falls actually has its own main quest. And as far as Easter egg structure goes, it's definitely the easiest one in the game, and it probably should be. But, you know, considering when we had Cold War Zombies release, D Machine had one main Easter egg, but it had almost like no side Easter eggs to speak of, whereas Liberty Falls is the casual map and it has a main quest that, albeit isn't very long, but it is also pretty loaded with side Easter eggs, I would say. There's a lot to do in this map that I think makes it interesting. At this point, I personally don't think Liberty Falls is anything super special. Like, this isn't a top 5 map of all time or anything, but I also don't feel like it's trying to be. I think this map is perfectly serviceable for the game, and I find myself gravitating towards playing this one when I just want to like kill zombies or try out a new gun or use a new loadout, something like that. This is the map I always pick because it has by far the fastest setup, step where you just get into it and go. The main Easter egg of the map involves you building the jet gun, getting these like LTG parts, and then filling up these ether canisters for this big thing in the church, and then essentially holding out. There's really not a whole lot to this Easter egg, and I think for this map that was the right call, because clearly they want as many people as possible to be doing main quests. Later on, Black Ops 6 added this thing called directed mode, which essentially, you know, caps the rounds out and walks you through the quests step by step. It tells you where things are, gives you objective markers. I don't personally really find myself playing directed mode, but it is a thing that some people will play just in order to experience the main quest of the story, but you can do it in the classic standard mode just to experience it as intended. Either way, the Liberty Falls Easter egg is easy enough to where it should be a lot of people's first Easter egg completion and get them into the idea of what completing Easter eggs is like, because they do get more complicated from here. However, to sum up, I think Liberty Falls is a really serviceable and good map. I think it's competent, and I think it has confidence in its direction as well, which not all the maps I would say are true for, like Cold War, for instance. This map, I think, does have its vision, and it has a substantial amount of things to do where it feels like it's living and breathing every time I play it. I think it's a very good map. Wouldn't rate it top 5 or anything, but it's great for this game. Now, this is a little bit of like an appetizer into what the main course is, which is Terminus. This is clearly the more complicated and involved map, which I think having these two distinct flavors of maps is a very good thing for the game. This map clearly requires a lot more upfront investment, and it's not quite as snappy just to get set up and going in the game, but obviously that other side of that coin means the game is more rewarding and deep, and the map is more intricate as a result, and I would say far more rewarding to play. With Terminus, you have a much more involved main Easter egg that involves you building a wonder weapon, traveling to all of the different islands on the map, and then eventually culminating in not only one, but two sort of boss fights, a mini boss fight and then a main big one at the end. The Easter egg is pretty substantial when it comes to the amount of steps and what's required within them, and it's worth pointing out that Treyarch have finally been able to, I feel like, healthily integrate puzzle steps. And what I mean by that is if you've played any Black Ops 4 Zombies Easter eggs at all, these are overloaded with puzzle steps to a point where that was one of the weakest aspects of the game. They were unbelievably tedious, and in response, Cold War Zombies maps had almost no puzzles to speak of, period. They just completely did away with them, which I don't know if is the best answer either, but it was certainly a response to the overload of puzzles in BO4. In Black Ops 6, I feel like they've been able to healthily integrate what I'm going to call light puzzles into the Easter eggs. Like, for example, there's a step when you're trying to get the wonder weapon on Terminus that involves you doing a little bit of algebra. Nothing too crazy, but you can solve this by actually using real mathematics. And if you don't want to do that, you can obviously have another in-game way just to spend points and get the solution. So you can kind of interact with these puzzles if you want, but you don't necessarily have to. There's another puzzle on the brand new map that involves you basically just collecting 6 different symbols and then inputting them on a wall. These are examples of light puzzles that I'm completely okay with. And it's because they don't grind the pace of gameplay to a complete halt, which is what I felt like they did in Black Ops 4. It's not that I inherently dislike hard puzzles, it's just that if the point of the mode I'm playing is a zombies survival mode, and I'm literally having to grind the pace of gameplay to a stop to solve this puzzle, it's really not a very good step. But they've healthily integrated puzzles to where they actually work with the gameplay and not against it, which finally, like, that's one of the biggest praises I can give BO6, is that we can have puzzles again, but they don't have to destroy and go completely against the actual core zombies gameplay. So they've been able to integrate these, and I'm glad they finally figured it out. I'm looking forward to how they integrate these more. Terminus as a map is a lot more involved, has a lot more going on, and the surface area is huge. Now, granted, a lot of that playable space is technically just water. A lot of this, I think, was somewhat misleading because they're like, this is the biggest round-based map ever. And while that's maybe technically true, a lot of that space is just either not relevant to the game or is just filler that is in between certain playable spaces of the map. I'm also not even saying the integration of water is bad. I just think it's underutilized. For example, the tentacle that comes out of the water to chase you around, I really thought, like, they showed this off in the trailer a lot. This was a big part of the, selling point of the map. I thought there was going to be side Easter eggs associated with this, but there's really nothing to this tentacle. You can't even actually kill it, necessarily. So it doesn't really do anything. I just think the water aspect is criminally underutilized, apart from a couple of small Easter eggs and a way just to traverse these areas of the map. Either way, it's fine. It's not bad or anything, it's just a little bit underused. Liberty Falls did not have a big boss fight at the end of its Easter egg. You have this final lockdown holdout step, but that's pretty much it. There's not like a big main boss fight, but Terminus is very different because it does have a big boss fight at the very end where you fight Patient 13. And finally, this was just a glimpse into the potential that zombies boss fights can be, and this was a really big step in the right direction and a giant improvement from maps past. D Machine also didn't really have a boss fight, and it wasn't exactly a lockdown either. It was kind of this like protection thing that didn't really require you to protect him because he couldn't die. That was a very weird, strange situation. Firebase Z and that boss fight in Cold War Zombies was also just a complete joke, and I think Treyarch have always struggled with making good, engaging, and fun boss fights. Weirdly enough, that's somewhere where I feel like Infinity Ward always excelled. And basically every IW Zombies boss fight was phenomenal, and it still has the best boss fight in Zombies history, and that has never been beaten, and I'm honestly not even sure nothing ever will top that. Either way, Patient 13 is a huge step in the right direction for Treyarch, and it's an actually engaging, fun, and intricate boss fight with many mechanics, a lot of things going on, a lot of ways to approach it, and it's definitely one of the upper tier boss fights in COD Zombies history, which I'm very happy to say. They've done a phenomenal job at designing a boss that isn't a total pushover, but didn't make them to where it's like just a bullet sponge or something annoying to fight. There's a lot of strategy and intricacy to the Patient 13 fight that makes you want to replay it and figure out better ways to approach it, and you're not necessarily guaranteed to beat this on your first try either. For the last couple of years of Zombies, I feel like every single time you enter a boss fight, you're pretty much guaranteed to beat it on your first try if you're even a somewhat competent Zombies player. But now, that's not always guaranteed, especially if you make some kind of mistake. You can get very hard punished in these fights, and it makes you want to try again, and I think that's the mark of a very well-designed fight, when you're blaming yourself and not the game if you lose, and I think Patient 13 embodies that completely. So I cannot give more high marks to Terminus and the Patient 13 fight overall. I would say if I had to pick a map at this point, I prefer Terminus just because there's a lot more to do in terms of side Easter eggs. Its main quest is more involved, and its boss fight is much better. Obviously, it requires a little bit more investment and setup, but it's a really well-designed map. Now, with these two maps on disc, that's one thing, and the reason I wanted to stop before I made this review really quick is I wanted DLC 1 to come out because I wanted to see how that map stacks amongst these two, and luckily, we have got Citadelle des Morts that came out like a couple of weeks ago, and at this point, we now have a pretty good idea of what most DLC maps are likely going to look like. I'm just going to say it right now, Citadelle des Morts is my favorite map in the game, even over Terminus and certainly over Liberty Falls, and the reason for that is it's the most, what I would say, crystallized experience in regards to what I personally enjoy and find fun in a COD Zombies map. This checks a lot of the boxes for me. Citadelle des Morts is not perfect though, and what I would say about that is the flaws in Citadelle des Morts, in my opinion, are more missed opportunities instead of things that I inherently dislike or, you know, don't enjoy or don't work about the map. This is very much how I felt about a lot of Cold War Zombies maps where they're not inherently bad, it's just that there's a lot of missed opportunities or things that they could have done to make the map even better. And I think Citadelle des Morts is completely solid when it comes to how it is on paper and how it plays. I just think that there's a lot of missed opportunities in places, particularly the wonder weapons. Obviously, this has 4 elemental swords, and I think they're fun and enjoyable to do and upgrade in their own right. Each sword has its own upgrade quest as well, and they're all associated with its element, you know, very reminiscent of the Origin Staves or the Dreisendrach bows. A lot of the community's problems, however, is that they say the swords are a little bit underwhelming or somewhat underpowered, and I completely agree with that sentiment, but that's not even my main issue with them. My thing with the swords is that I feel like they could have been taken a step further in a variety of directions. For example, in Ancient Evil, you can get these elemental god hands, and after creating them, they're perfectly usable and good just in these, you know, versions of them. However, they can be upgraded an additional second time to make the exalted hands of the gods, and I feel like they could have done the same thing here, and if people are complaining that the swords are a little bit underpowered, maybe that could have been alleviated by having another version where you get like the exalted sword. That's, you know, you can optionally go into this more intricate, difficult upgrade process, but you would get a better sword as a reward. You don't have to, and perhaps they make it where you can still do the main Easter egg with the normal version of the elemental swords, but if you just wanted a stronger build of that sword, you do the Exalted quest, for example, but that just isn't really present. You get the swords upgraded, and that's that. And they're a little bit underwhelming in that capacity, I suppose, too. But overall, I mean, I can't really complain. The 4 Wonder Weapon formula really is a tried and true zombies thing that, you know, maybe is somewhat overused, but really never fails. The main Easter egg of Citadelle de Morts is much more involved than both Liberty Falls and Terminus, and in my opinion is the perfect difficulty balance and what I would say the choice between making puzzle steps and gameplay-oriented steps. It is absolutely textbook in that regard, and if I designed my own Easter egg, it would probably look something like Citadelle de Morts' main quest. It's been by far my favorite Easter egg to go and replay multiple times over, and that's also because it has a stellar boss fight. I might honestly say it's the best Treyarch boss fight so far that's ever been made. This is the Guardian, and even though I gave all of this high praise to Patient 13, I'm going to give the exact same thing and more to the Guardian. It's like they tried to make a Souls boss for this game, and that works in a first-person shooter. That can be really tough and can be very unbalanced if you're not careful, and as long as you're not cheesing the boss with a power drill, the fight is actually very involved, and you have to be paying attention the entire time. It has lots of moves that are completely devastating, but are all reactable, and it even involves the swords to where it brings in those mechanics of being able to parry. Like, you can parry every single one of his moves to take no damage. That is an amazing, underrated feature of this map. The swords are intricate in a mechanical way that I absolutely love, and they play into how the boss fight goes as well in a way that I just love. Apart from the main Easter egg and final boss, the amount of side Easter eggs and quests to do is also off the charts, and they're stellar. This is quite literally what a textbook Black Ops 6 Zombies map should look like, in my opinion, and I can only hope the rest of the season are going to look like Citadelle de Morts in terms of content and the bosses, and maybe even taking it a step farther. Once again, there's nothing that I really inherently dislike about Citadelle de Morts. There's no mechanics or Easter egg steps or things that I just dislike in general. I just think it has a lot of missed opportunities that it could have been made even better by, and I think most of you would probably agree with that sentiment. Citadelle de Morts is the best map in the game and may potentially crack my top 10 zombie maps of all time. That I'm still thinking about that a little bit, but it very well could. Now, the thing is, though, the maps are an absolute W in this game, and even, you know, despite all of the controversy before launch and Liberty Falls not being a very good map, apparently to a lot of people, I'm going to say that after all of these hours and all the time that I've played in Black Ops 6 Zombies, they're all fantastic maps in their own right. These get an absolute W from me. Now, let's talk about, however, one of my least favorite things in Black Ops 6 Zombies, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is high rounds. I absolutely despise this game's high rounds. I said at the beginning of the video that I just absolutely love the core gameplay loop, and I said rounds 1 to 30 are like perfect. However, after that, things start getting a little bit weird for a couple of reasons, but before we can discuss why, let's briefly talk about the nature of high rounds in older zombie games, and I used to love high rounds. That was kind of, in a way, how my YouTube channel got started in some sense, but in order to understand why I think high rounds are so bad in Black Ops 6, we need to first fundamentally discuss what is a high round. Now, I've brought this up before, but it's an interesting question I would like to pose to you. What do you think a high round is? Is a high round the literal number that's on screen, or is a high round a round that is proportionate to the number of people that can't or won't get there? So, for example, in World at War Zombies, round 30 was a pretty high round because most people at the time had no idea how to reach that. That was like a pretty impressive number back in the day. That was what you might consider a high round. In Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2, I would say 100 was usually considered a high round, maybe even 50 in those older games. And Black Ops 3, round 100 was pretty much the gold standard for what most people consider to be at least a high round. In Black Ops 4, this started getting a little bit weird. Round 100 was usually it, and then Cold War, it kind of made it feel like round 100 was like baby's first high round. And I would say in Cold War, most people could probably get round 100 if they really sat down, had enough time, and tried. Most people could probably attain it with the right strategy, and it's really not too hard in that game. And so the point I'm making is it fundamentally depends on how you define high round, but regardless of how you define it, it is an inevitability and a truth that high rounding in any zombie game forces you into a certain kind of playstyle, right? All of the other viable playstyles in rounds 1 to 30, or what you might call the early game, are playable, and then at some point it funnels you into one specific playstyle that is the only viable way to get to high round. So again, for instance, in Black Ops 1, the only reliable way to get get to really high rounds was trap strategies. You have to run traps to kill zombies because your weapons won't kill, grenades don't kill, nothing else actually takes out zombies other than traps. In Black Ops 2, it's basically a mixture of trap strategies or wonder weapon strats. In Black Ops 3, it's using alternate ammo types, which is the, ammo mod on your weapon essentially, and or trap strats. And in Black Ops 4, it was like using your specialist and a Hellion salvo launcher. And Cold War, it was usually using Ring of Fire and a ray gun. Basically, it forces you into one kind of playstyle. That's fine. I don't disagree with that. I don't think you shouldn't be forced into one kind of playstyle, but the particular playstyle that BO6 high rounds force you into are just so mind-numbingly boring that I can't even bear to just sit down and do them. This playstyle involves you crafting mutant injections or picking them up from special enemies and just entering them and then spamming your melee button, essentially. This is how you high round in the game. This is what they look like. You stand in a third-person mangler suit. You don't even really have to play the game, and you just keep clicking your melee button for hours and hours and hours. It just gets so tedious. And if you're not doing a mangler strategy, there are a couple of special ones. For example, on Terminus, you can use an RCXD and put it up on this crate, and then you just don't play the game. You literally just sit here and watch zombies die. You don't have to do anything at all. You're not even actually interacting with the game anymore. Or on Citadelle Day More, interestingly, you can run these point of power traps, which work, strangely like Ring of Fire, and then you spam a Sigma launcher at the ground, which feels very much like a Black Ops 4 high round strategy. I'm not saying this one is that much more fun either, but I think this at least beats sitting in a mangler injection. For a while, I didn't know exactly what it was that bothered me about high rounds so much in this game, but I don't find them fun whatsoever. Even in Cold War, if you're not doing a ray gun Ring of Fire strategy, you can still just train around the spawn room of D Machine and use like a War Machine launcher to blow up zombies in high rounds. You're still at least running around, shooting things, interacting with the game in a way that feels like you're, shooting zombies in Call of Duty. Like, you're not sitting in a mangler injection or just spamming the ground with the launcher. Either way, the thing that I fundamentally it baffles me that I can't wrap my head around is that Black Ops 6 has Omni movement, right? The game with theoretically the most advanced and interesting movement system is the high round game that you move the least in, period. Like, think about that for a second. Before the game came out, we knew Zombies was going to have Omni movement, and my hopes was that this would really open up some very interesting things about high rounds, and maybe if you're like literally a movement god, if you've mastered this movement system, that would be the way to make high rounds viable and interesting, and it could be really fun. But ironically, this game completely just negates the interesting movement that any of this could have because you spend most of the game not moving. You're incentivized to not use it in higher rounds. That's why I think that high rounds feel so bad in this game. A lot of people say, hey, the guns, every single weapon sharply falls off at about round 30 to 35 to where they're no longer usable, and it forces you very quickly into this playstyle of using mutant injections and not really running around anymore. The game feels like it stops being fun after about round 35, and if you don't enjoy the mangler injection strategy, then you're probably not going to enjoy the game past round 35, which is a damn shame because it could start theoretically getting interesting at that point if you were actually incentivized to move around and utilize Omni movement, but you're just not. Now, the other problem with high rounds, and this has been pointed out by literally anyone who's played them, is that the special enemy spam is downright absurd. Now, recently in the last couple of updates, they've done a lot to kind of cool that off a little bit. Special enemies aren't quite as overbearing and annoying as they were when the game launched. However, they're still pretty excessive, and I've been told by sources that one of the reasons for all of the special enemy spam in high rounds is because of the way that the game handles memory, and also that the fact that this is an online-only zombie game, it has a harder time, like on the server end, spawning in tons and tons of regular zombies, so they kind of have to overcompensate by throwing in a bunch of special enemies instead of more regular zombies, if that makes sense. They're going to have less entities, but they just kind of compensate by adding a ton of them instead. I'm not going to pretend to know the exact technical reason we have special enemy spam in Black Ops 6 Zombies high rounds, but the end result is that it makes the experience very unfun and kind of just annoying to play. And for me, high rounds are the weakest aspect of this game, which is a big shame because it's something that I love traditionally in zombies. I genuinely love high rounds. It's one of my favorite things to do, but it's not that enjoyable replayable in BO6. It's just such a disappointment because it's like that's the one piece of the puzzle that's not clicking for me. Everything else is awesome and really works. The general gameplay is nearly perfect, and I really appreciate the innovations that they've made to the gameplay since Cold War. The Easter eggs are truly fantastic. I believe they've struck a near perfect balance when it comes to quest design and getting people involved in what doing a zombies Easter egg is, and they're fun, they're very replayable, and I've played this zombie game more than I've played anything in like a number of years, maybe a decade or more. This zombies game is great for almost every aspect except high rounds, which just sucks because it's one of my favorite things to do, but I just don't like it in this game, and unless some major change is made, I don't know if I ever will. I don't know if they'll ever be fun to me. The problem is the content we're going to get for the rest of the year is probably going to be really good, but just soiled by the fact that I can't really high round them and enjoy them in the way that I would like to. Another aspect that adds replayability for me, so that is a bit of a big downside. Now, another topic I want to bring up that's completely outside the realm of gameplay, it's something that happened recently, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about in regards to BO6, is the actor strike. Basically, 3 out of the 4 main voice actors for the Zombies crew in BO6 have quit due to failing to obtain AI protections in their work contracts with Activision, I presume. In fact, you may have noticed Samantha Maxis already quit. If you do any of the SAM trials in the map now versus like 2 months ago, the voices are quite different. They had to recast her, and Samantha Maxis, or Julie Nathanson, has been voicing Samantha for over a decade now.
It's not Sam. It can't be Sam.
Why do you sound like Agent Maxis?
She was my source code. The true Samantha Maxis sacrificed herself to save your world.
This is also extremely tragic and disappointing because they're probably going to have to recast a lot of the main crew and other characters, you know, supporting people like Peck, Dr. Strauss, stuff like that, people who may or may not end up quitting as well. And that's unfortunate because I haven't really touched on the story much, but I'm actually very interested in the direction of the story compared to how I felt about Cold War because of what they've been doing in handling the story. Like, it's wild because I'm actually interested again. Like, I'm invested in this story, but I don't want to take them have this sliver of investment that the community is having in their new, like, mind-blowing direction of the story and completely squander it due to, you know, not being able to secure these AI protections for these voice actors and just the general distaste of AI in general. I'm not particularly fond of AI, and I'm glad that the gaming community in some sense has been able to take a hard stance against this. I think we need to hold strong in that capacity, otherwise AI will probably become more rampant rather than less. I called this 2 years ago, by the way, in my Modern Warfare 2 review, and nobody listened to me then, but I said this is only going to get worse from here on out, and now we're seeing some real ramifications from it. The writing was on the wall over 2 years ago, but now we're seeing some genuine consequences, and it sucks as a Zombies player for this to have been the case at the point where I'm actually getting involved and invested in the story again. This could have happened in Cold War Zombies, and maybe I wouldn't have cared as much because that game just had operators and there wasn't a canon crew. It's like, whatever, you know. But this is actually impactful to the game now because they're focusing so heavily on investing in getting more involved in the story that it's just not really going to work. That's one of the other big issues that's affecting the game outside of the gameplay itself. So that is an issue I wanted to bring up and discuss, but overall, I would say that the content quality we're going to get for the rest of Black Ops 6 Zombies, assuming they stay on this trajectory, is going to be very good. And compared to this point in Cold War Zombies' life cycle, at this point in time, we only had D Machine. At this point in time in Black Ops 6, we have Liberty Falls, Terminus, and Citadelle Day More, and we're only going to be getting more maps as the year goes on. So I think the future is extraordinarily bright. In its current state and trajectory, I would give Black Ops 6 Zombies a 9 out of 10 at this point if I gave Cold War Zombies an 8 out of 10. I think they need to be able to overcome this big obstacle they have with these actors and the AI situation, but if they can figure that out, I think Black Ops 6 is due for a very solid year going forward. So we'll see about that, but I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of my thoughts and an overview after I've played this game for, you know, basically a couple hundred hours at this point. You can let me know what you think about this down below, but hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe before you go for more Zombies content, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out, guys.